And what I wanted to do, the project of this book, was to convince people that this is a very particular economic operating system. And the way to do that was to use the tools of the media theorist. Who invented it? When did they do it? And why did they do it? And what I found out was that this originated after the Crusades. It was right after the Crusades that all the soldiers came back to their towns in Western Europe because they'd gone to Arab worlds, found out all these other things, found new technologies, new systems. They came back to their towns in Western Europe and they erected the marketplace for the first time. It was an innovation from the Arab world called the bazaar. The marketplace, it was there 2 days a week, usually like Tuesdays and Thursdays, Tuesdays and Fridays. People would bring all the stuff they had made or grown and they would trade it with each other. Instead of just giving everything to the feudal lord or the vassal now, they started to trade in a peer-to-peer fashion. And when bartering wasn't enough, they developed local currencies, market monies, not big central currencies, little market monies that were usually invented in the morning and then expired by the end of the day. So these were more like poker chips. So we can look into the specific ones. There were a lot of different ones, but they got those from the Arab world too. And it was interesting because people never had money before. That money was for long distance trade, gold florins and things. Peasants didn't have that. They didn't have a means of exchange. So now they had a means of exchange and they started to get wealthy. This was the beginning of what later got called the burghers, the bourgeois, the middle class. The merchant class got really wealthy. And no, it wasn't the best of times. It was still the Middle Ages, and there were rats and death and, people beating you up. It was a little Game of Thrones-y, but it was the greatest period of economic growth that we've ever really seen, of organic, distributed economic growth. People started to work only 3 or 4 days a week. Women were taller in medieval England with the marketplace than they were at any time in history until 1980. Which is an interesting one. It's just one measure of the fact that these people were eating and healthy and doing well. The problem with it, of course, was that as the people got wealthy, the aristocracy got relatively poorer. These were families that hadn't worked in 10 centuries. They had always, it's true, these were the former feudal lords and now the proto-aristocracy. So what they did was they came up with two innovations, two core tenets of a new operating system to slow the rise of the merchant class. And you can look, this isn't just my interpretation. This is, look at what they read. Look at what they read, or what they wrote down about why they were establishing chartered monopolies, why they were establishing central currency. And this is the history that for some reason is not as celebrated as talked about as it should be. First invention they came up with was the chartered monopoly. The chartered monopoly was a rule. Chartered monopoly. It was exactly what it sounds like. So now one business is chartered by the king to be in charge of an entire industry, and everyone else has to work for that person. So whoever's the king's friend, let's say it's Erwin, you're a shoemaker, and you're my favorite shoemaker in all of my country. So now anybody who wants to be a shoemaker, you got to work for him, period. Or I'll kill you. I mean, we had swords and knights and people to do that. So if you're working for him rather than making shoes, what does that mean? Now, instead of creating shoes and exchanging the value you created, now you are working for him. So now this is really when employment was invented. The only people who were indentured by time before that were slaves. Now people knew that the normal way to work was for me to clock hours. So instead of selling the value I created, now I'm selling the time I've spent. That's when technologically, that's when the clock tower went up on the tallest building in medieval towns. Because now time was money. And the idea of the clock made it feel fair. It's really an hour. I'm not working longer. It's not taking his word for it. There's a clock to make it all fair. But it was fair what? It was fair monopoly. The second invention they came up with was central currency. They made all local currencies, all of these market monies were illegal. Now, if you wanted to have money in order to buy something, you had to borrow money from the central treasury at interest. Very clever idea, because what did that do? An interest-bearing currency lets people who have money make money simply by lending money. That was the point. It allowed the people who already had capital make money by lending their capital to others, because this was interest-bearing currency. The other problem with interest-bearing currency is not only do you have to pay, do you have to borrow it, but you have to pay back more than you borrowed in the first place. And if everybody's going to pay back more than they borrowed in the first place, what does that mean about the economy? Economy has to grow. Either that or you end up with a lot of bankrupt people who can't pay back what they borrowed. So interest-bearing currency demands, its bias is towards growth. And this worked well right then, because what was Western Europe doing? Growing. We were colonizing everywhere. Colonizing America, colonizing South America, colonizing Africa, trying to colonize China. As long as we were growing, that was great. So we had our great chartered monopoly, British East India Trading Company, Dutch East India Trading Company. We had them going out, taking over spaces, partnered with the monarchs and their gunships, and it all looked pretty good as long as we could keep expanding into other places, and that all finally came crumbling down around World War II, when these countries started to push back, when little brown people in brown places said, no, you can't just extract our value and enslave our people, right? We're going to push back. So England gives up some of its colonies and all, and then Eisenhower, right after World War II, he's faced with this problem. How do we continue to grow as an economy without these developing nations to take over? We can have Bretton Woods and some trade deals and all that, and have everybody's money pegged to our money, but what are we going to do? And that's when Vannevar Bush wrote the famous essay, As We May Think, which most of us just think is this great description of computer technology. It's not just that. As We May Think is really an argument saying these tools of war can be repurposed to tools to build our economy, to tools of a civilization. And what was the idea was that even though we'd run out of physical territory, computer technology could create virtual territory, virtual surface area on the market, so the market could continue to expand. But instead of expanding physically, now we expand in terms of consciousness. That's why we moved into an intention economy. The new resource that we colonize is human attention, human time, rather than physical territory and resources, which we still, of course, have to go and extract. But what we ended up with then were digital businesses, if you will, from not just Google, and Google's really not the worst of it in some ways, because Google, at least Google has the intention to be here 10, 20, 30 years from now. So it has to take a slightly different approach. Google is not flipping, right? You're not going to flip Google. It's kind of too big to flip at this point, right? I mean, Uber or somebody, they're still, but what sort of business model does this operating system engender? It promotes the Walmart model, which is just colonialism writ small. What does Walmart do? Walmart moves into a region. It uses its tremendous war chest of capital to undercut all the local merchants, to put them all out of business. That's good for two reasons. One, no one can buy anything anywhere else. And two, no one can work anywhere else. So now we can change the terms of employment so that if you want a job, you've got to work part-time for Walmart. And you don't get health care, and you don't get this, you don't get that. So slowly over time, the people who are working at or in a Walmart town have to go on welfare. The town gets poorer and poorer, and eventually, it takes about 15 or 20 years, the town goes bankrupt. And then what does Walmart do? Closes and moves to the next area and sucks their value out. I mean, that's the scorched earth approach of a company like that. That's the way they understand it. And as long as they understand the world to be infinite, it's okay, we can move into China, we move into India, we'll find other places, and then when that economy there is restored, for that last place that we closed, we'll go back there and suck out the money again. That's the mindset. So when that mindset ends up informing businesses that are running on digital platforms, it no longer takes 20 years for that to happen. It only takes 2 years for that to happen. So you look at a company like, and it's not about being evil. It's just about adopting an operating system as the way to do business. It's just understanding it as the way things are. So you take a company like Amazon. So why does Amazon choose the book industry to go into first? Is it because Bezos and his friends just love books and they want to promote literature and help authors and publishers reach more people? No, it's because the publishing industry, I know this because I'm part of it, the publishing industry is low-hanging fruit. We are a motley, awful, non-growth, inefficient business. The brilliance of the book industry is we managed to hide the fact that we don't make money for the last 200 years. We don't. It doesn't. It's this little kind of just fudge it, get to the next book kind of industry. So why did they pick that? Because it was an easy one to take over. Because you could establish, it wasn't to make money with books, it was to establish a platform monopoly in books that could then be leveraged to another one and another one. Why did Uber pick cabs? Because they want to stay in the taxi business, because that's such a great industry that's going to really promote a multi-billion-dollar company? No, it's because cabs were the most inefficiently run, awful, slow growth, ridiculously barely sustainable industry, meaning it was ripe for takeover if you've got a war chest of capital. So the poor guys, if you're driving a car for Uber, what are you really doing? You are doing R&D for a robotic car company that you don't even own. Right? You're making your own job obsolete. That's the work that you're doing. And they don't really care. They don't care because, so you go in and you destroy the existing taxi economy and infrastructure. It doesn't matter if they can't make the long run money out of that. Right? They're destroying that market, just as Amazon destroyed the book market. You destroy the marketplace because you're just using it to leverage into another one. And that's the problem, is that we end up putting destructive, extractive corporate capitalism on digital steroids. And then you see how all this keeps going. You know, and it's not just a digital problem, it's a finance problem. As Deloitte showed in 2011, corporate profit over corporate size has been going down for 75 years. Think about that in terms of in terms of functions. Corporate profit over corporate size has been going down. What does that mean? It means that corporations are really good at extracting all the money from an economy, but really bad at deploying those assets once they have them. It's not just because they're stuck in some European bank account and they can't bring it over without taxation. It's that they're obese. It's that they're storing the money in fat rather than muscle. Right? They don't know how to actually do anything with the money. And that's because the OS that they're using is to extract money and store it in share price, rather than to think of how to create a healthy, living, ongoing circulatory economy. They would rather make $10 once than $1 10 times. They can't even conceive of the $1 10 times, because then you've got to keep letting go of the money to make it. They're stuck, like I said, they're stuck on the hard drive and not in RAM. And then you look at the way we deploy our developers, our smartest kids. They come out of Stanford, and what job do you take if you get out of Stanford? The highest paying one's going to be working for Goldman. And what are you going to do for Goldman? Are you going to be helping them use money to create value, to help them deploy capital in ways that are the most efficient for the development of an economy? No, you're going to write algorithms that help you extract money from the stock exchange, or write derivatives of derivatives of derivatives that help you compress time. Derivatives are basically abstractions of stock, which are abstractions of the marketplace. So you can do derivatives or meta-derivatives and meta-derivatives of that. And of course, the derivative market has gotten so much bigger than the real stock market that, you know, the New York Stock Exchange was purchased by its derivatives exchange. It was. A thing is what was been swallowed by its own abstraction. And that's the biggest business in the world now.